Have you heard the left saying what to do to solve the conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians? It's easy. Well, if Israel would just give the Palestinians land for their own state, there'd be peace. Or Israel is the problem, standing in the way of lasting peace. True or false? Author David Brog says history shows that those ideas simply aren't true. Take a look.
United Nations ambassadors, world leaders, diplomats, and even U.S. presidents have all touted a two-state solution to bring lasting peace to the Middle East. And most have also promoted the idea that Israel is the main obstacle to that peace. But author David Brog says the problem with the argument that Israel is the obstacle to peace is that it's just not true. 5 times since 1937, Jews in the region have agreed to proposals to divide territory into 2 states, one Jewish, one Palestinian, living side by side in peace. Every one of those offers have been rejected by Arab leaders. The last Land for Peace offer was made by Prime Minister Ehud Olmert in 2008, in which the Palestinians would have received 93% of the West Bank for a state, and East Jerusalem as its capital. That offer was flatly rejected by Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas. Brog says it's time to set the record straight on this and other myths about Israel. He does that in a new book, Reclaiming Israel's History, Roots, Rights, and the Struggle for Peace.
Well, author David Brog is with us now. He's the director of Christians United for Israel. He's here with me now to talk about a new book, or his book is called Reclaiming Israel's History, and it's available where books are sold. David, good to see you. Thank you.
Pat, thank you so much for having me.
Look, tell me about this whole two-state solution, Israel giving up all this land, and suddenly there's going to be peace. True or false?
It's false, and this isn't theory. This isn't conjecture. As the lead-in noted, Israel's tried on 5 separate occasions to offer the Palestinians critical land. We're talking about the biblical heartland of Judea and Samaria.
Yeah.
We're also talking about the strategic heartland of Israel. These are the mountains, the mountain chain that overlooks Israel's narrow, flat coastal plain that contains 70% of Israel's population and infrastructure. Yet Israel was willing to give away its biblical heart, its strategic heart, for peace. They tried it 5 times, 1937, 1947, 1967, 2000, and 2008. This isn't exactly ancient history. Each time the Palestinians said no. You know the definition of insanity, when you keep trying the same thing and expect a different result.
Well, the Palestinians, they had that right of return. They were basically saying, you know, we've got to bring in our relatives, our cousins, our uncles, our aunts, and flood your country. I mean, was that the deal that Israel said, no way?
Well, Israel's basically said, look, we'll split this land with you. We'll give you your own state. But yeah, you don't have the right to flood our state. You know, the United Nations has 2 definitions for refugees. One definition is for every refugee in the world except for the Palestinians. And by that definition, if you yourself had to flee your home, you're a refugee. But your children aren't, your grandchildren aren't.
Right.
They have a separate definition for the Palestinians that says Palestinians and their children and grandchildren and descendants in perpetuity will be considered refugees. And so they're trying to use this unusual and unique definition of refugees to flood Israel with immigrants, and as a result, Israel will cease to be a Jewish state. It will become the 24th Arab state.
Well, you know, that United Nations, people don't realize this UNWA Works Administration, what do? They've been around ever since that early war, and they've kept these Palestinians in perpetual bondage and servitude. They won't let them get free.
They keep them looking back in anger instead of forward into the future with hope. You know, Pat, over 800,000 Jews were expelled from their homes in Arab countries after the 1948 war. They moved to Israel. They don't look back in anger. They don't want their homes back in Libya or Morocco or Iraq. They built families, they built homes, they built lives. The Palestinians need to do likewise. That's when there'll be peace. Well,
the United States keeps giving money to the UN to fund this incredibly insane agency that's nothing but a tool of the Palestinians.
It's right, and it's unfortunate because, like you said, they're kept in perpetual victim status. They're taught anger, they're taught resentment, and they're taught that Israel is the source of their problems, but for Israel there would be peace. If you look at the record objectively, historically, you see Israel's the side that's wanted to make painful compromises for peace. They're desperate for peace. Israeli mothers do not want to send their sons or daughters to war anymore. Unfortunately, Israel's offer, the Palestinians have rejected it 5 times. Why? Because they cling to this dream of destroying Israel and getting back homes that they've never seen and they've never been in. And until they give up that dream of destroying Israel and decide on a different dream, building a future of growth and building and good relations with Israel, there can't be peace.
You know, Mahmoud Abbas was in the White House just telling lies. It was unbelievable. We want peace, but they incite hatred among their people against Israel, and then they offer $25,000 to every Palestinian who kills an Israeli. It's unbelievable.
Well, this is critical. As you said, Mahmoud Abbas comes to the White House and says nice words.
Yeah.
Talks about peace and raising their children in peace. The reality is starkly the opposite. They teach their children hate. They teach their children terror. They praise terrorists. They name streets and town squares and schools and Boy Scout chapters after terrorists. And this is the last piece. They pay terrorists.
Yes.
If you go to jail because you killed Israelis, you get a salary from the Palestinian government better than you could make through honest work.
Yeah.
And if you die killing Israelis, which is the goal in these suicide attacks, your family's well taken care of. I don't care if you pay for terrorism before the fact or after the fact. You are a sponsor of terrorism. You are a state sponsor of terrorism. And the idea that we're going to ignore this record and just be fooled by Abbas because he says some lies in the White House is unfortunate. Every American leader has to go through this, where they believe the lies and then they see the reality. I hope President Trump's learning curve is short.
We do. Why do you think the left has embraced, you know, this boycott and divest? It's on college campuses. You go out and talk to students, and they're totally against Israel.
They are, and that's actually what led me to write the book, Pat,
Really?
because I spend a lot of time on college campuses. The minute you get to a college campus, there is a consensus that everyone shares, and it's what you mentioned in the beginning. If only Israel would give the Palestinians a state, if only Israel would end its so-called occupation of the West Bank and give the Palestinians a state, there would be peace. Birds would sing, flowers would bloom. And when you walk them through the history and they learn what they never knew, that Israel's tried doing exactly that time after time after time, only to be turned down, very often violently turned down, then all of a sudden their minds are open to a different reality, a reality in which Israel isn't the problem, but those seeking to destroy Israel are the problem.
Well, you know, this false narrative, the whole thing, they talk about Muhammad going on a trip on his horse to heaven, and his foot stepped down on the Temple Mount, you know, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is, and then he went off to heaven. And his wife, Aisha, said, they may have said he went to heaven, but I know he was in bed here with me all night. I mean, it's a lie. I was with a guy, I was going to see Yasser Arafat late one night, and we went by a place, and he said, this is Rachel's tomb. She's one of the honored people of Islam. And I said, you know, this is Jacob's wife. It's Israel. Well, what are you talking about? But it's this lie that they perpetuate.
Well, you know, Jerusalem is mentioned hundreds of times in the Bible.
Yeah.
Jerusalem has been the capital of the Jewish people for over 3,000 years. And yet, Muslims say it's holy to them. Israel's response is, okay, fine. The Temple Mount, where the Jewish temple stood, where Jesus taught and prayed, the Muslims say it's holy to them. Israel said, fine. In fact, after Israel reunited Jerusalem in 67, after Israel regained sovereignty over the Temple Mount, their first act was to defer to Muslim sensibilities and let them continue to govern that Temple Mount. A Muslim Waqf administers the Temple Mount. So Israel has bent over backwards to accommodate Arab sensibilities and Muslim sensibilities. Unfortunately, it's not brought them peace, but even worse, the world continues to blame Israel.
Bottom line, I really believe that the last fight may be over Jerusalem. That's what the Bible says. But the truth is the Jews are not going to give up Jerusalem. And if the Arabs want it, they're going to have to fight. Don't you think that's going to happen?
I pray not. I pray not. Every Israeli prays not. That's why Israel's willing to make these painful sacrifices and give up critical, strategic, biblical lands for peace, because they don't want another war.
Yes, go ahead.
Just because you don't want war doesn't mean you get peace.
But they're not going to give up Jerusalem. They may give up the rest of it.
No. You know, well, look, Israelis have even offered to give the Arabs half of Jerusalem, Arab East Jerusalem. Olmert in 2008, Brog in 2000 said you can get the West Bank, you can have Gaza, you can have half of Jerusalem, Arab East Jerusalem. They offered that, but they still didn't accept it, because their dream is not two states living side by side in peace. Their dream is still the destruction of Israel. The only way there'll be peace, Pat, is if the Palestinians abandon that evil dream and recognize the need to compromise and to live in peace with the Jews who have rights in that land too. They believe Jews are interlopers. Jews have no rights in Israel. The Jews have come into their land. No, they have to recognize Jews have roots in this land too.
Well, they were there first.
That go back far further and are rich and deep and long-standing.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is a book David has written to clarify a whole lot of things. It'll be very eye-opening to you, and especially you can give to your college student who wants to boycott and divest. David, thank you. Tremendous insight. Thank you, my friend.
Really appreciate it, Pat. Great to be with you.
Thank you. All right.